Qin Tian and Nick encountered a group of men in Area E7, introducing themselves as members of the Lada tribe. To their surprise, they learned that there were many tribes in the area. When asked about their tribe, the blue-eyed leader confessed he hadn't heard of the Lada tribe, and questioned whether Qin Tian had killed the bear. As expected, the group's leader asserted that the bear was theirs since they had already hunted it. Qin Tian quickly agreed, stunning the men. They became flustered and explained that he would only get half of it since he was the one who killed the bear. This reasonable response confused Qin Tian, who was expecting a different reaction. Qin Tian didn't want credit for the kill since he simply wanted help in building a ship. He argued that it wouldn't be fair to claim the entire bear since he only delivered the final blow after it was already injured by the others. He expressed his need for either the fur or paws, but the leader insisted on giving both. The men had celebrated after the huge bear was taken down, knowing it would provide sustenance for a while. They expressed gratitude to Qin Tian for killing the bear and granted him the right to dismantle it. Qin Tian was surprised when the leader handed him a ulu knife, as he had been searching for a source of iron. While contemplating where he could find iron, Nick interrupted his thoughts. Qin Tian suggested that the men should handle the dismembering since it was their hunt. The leader agreed, promising a fair share. Qin Tian then inquired if they were Inuits, to which the leader confirmed. Qin Tian had already suspected it. The leader, curious, asked if Qin Tian and Nick were from the outside. Confused, Qin Tian sought more details, wondering what the leader meant. Nick watched the two discuss the whole time and hoped they could get more information. The discussion ended and Qin Tian told Nick to go back to their camp and depart to Zip's tribe. Nick agreed since they just finished cutting the polar bear. The two rode on a sled pulled by Zip and his huskies. Nick inquired about Qin Tian's findings. Qin Tian explained that there were many tribes in the area, and the knife originated from a group known as Outsiders. These outsiders arrived on large ships from unknown places, engaging in trade with the local tribes. Nick wondered if the Outsiders would return, and Qin Tian confirmed that their next visit was scheduled for the summer. Nick also pondered whether Zip and the others were curious about their backgrounds. Qin Tian only revealed that they had survived a shipwreck and found it remarkable that they had managed to endure in the snowy landscape. Trusting Zip to be a good person, Qin Tian expressed a hope to share more about their tribe with him. They reached Qin Tian's camp not long after, and Zip couldn't help but wonder how they endured so long in such a place. They even inquired if the group had encountered any wolves. Zip shared that many wolves roamed deep within the forest, led by a particularly large one. Concerned, he urged Qin Tian to leave the area quickly. To everyone's surprise, Qin Tian admitted to encountering the wolves and revealed that they had even killed 2 of them. The Inuit men were taken aback, and Qin Tian provided proof in the form of a necklace made from wolf fangs. Nick assured them that everything was packed, prompting Qin Tian to decide to share more details with Zip along the journey. Shortly afterward, the group sled through the snow-covered field, with Horn now pulling Qin Tian's transport sled. Nick updated Qin Tian that they were leaving the forest. Zip added that there was only one forest in the area, and suggested that beings other than humans inhabited it. As they conversed, Nick spotted a settlement, and Zip declared that they were back. The other Inuits came out of their igloos to check on Zip's group and see how their harvest went. Zip then introduced Qin Tian to his tribe members. However, there was no immediate response. After a moment, the kids started talking to Qin Tian, and the adults joined in, expressing joy at having a guest after a long time. Qin Tian and Nick felt the sincerity of their hospitality. Qin Tian soon realized that Nick couldn't understand the Inuits because they spoke a different language. Thanks to his language skills, Qin Tian was able to communicate with them, unlike Nick, who spoke Arabic. Nick mentioned that she could somewhat understand the kids, making Qin Tian think that their languages might have something in common. That night, Zip allowed the 2 visitors to stay in an empty igloo, and Zip's father also paid them a visit. He wanted to discuss the wolves that Qin Tian had hunted, and was pleased that they could now hunt in that area. Zip apologized for his father's interruption, explaining that many of their people had been killed by wolves when they first arrived in the area. This left Qin Tian wondering about the significance of Zip's words. 30 years ago, their tribe, residing in Anjakuni, went through an unusual weather event. Strong winds and a sudden storm hit. Zip's father went outside to check the weather, but a sudden gust of wind knocked them unconscious. When they awoke, they found themselves in an unfamiliar place completely different from Anjakuni. Zip thought it was a believable story, but then Qin Tian reminded him that Zip mentioned coming from outside. Zip realized the implication, and Qin Tian confirmed they, too, experienced something similar to Zip's father. They felt a connection, but Qin Tian clarified that they originated from a different place. Reflecting on Elan's story about a village disappearing near Anjakuni Lake in 1930, Qin Tian pieced together that it was Zip and the others who vanished. At that moment, a woman walked in with a lovely plate, and Qin Tian thought it came from the trade with the fleet. Zip then announced the beginning of the celebration to welcome their new friends. Everyone enjoyed the drinks and food that were prepared. Zip even brought out something special, a fragrant wine. Qin Tian took a sip and said it was excellent. Despite Qin Tian always assuming the Inuits were primitive, it turned out to be the opposite, likely due to the visiting fleet. Later, Zip opened the sewn-up belly of a seal. A foul smell made Qin Tian and Nick uneasy. From the seal's belly, Zip pulled out a puffin. It was a pickled puffin placed in the seal's belly with seal oil and left in the permafrost for 2 to 3 years before being served. Qin Tian felt uneasy, finding it worse than canned herring. Zip and the other Inuits then invited Qin Tian to try it, putting our protagonist on the spot. Qin Tian said he was already full, disappointing Zip. He mentioned not knowing how to remove feathers, and Zip showed him while suggesting ways to eat the pickled puffin. Zip drank the puffin's juices, making Qin Tian uneasy. Encouraged by Zip, Qin Tian took a sip, imagining the internal organs turning into liquid after many years. In response to their hospitality, he took another gulp, and Zip brought out more. Despite Qin Tian warning Nick not to try it, Nick mentioned another way to eat it, making Qin Tian feel a bit foolish. They were then shown to their accommodation, which despite looking small turned out to be nice. After experiencing great hospitality from the Inuits, they went to bed. Qin Tian was happy to meet Zip after being lost for nearly a year with Nick. He was grateful for the opportunity to communicate with others. The next morning, the two went outside, and the Inuits happily welcomed them. Qin Tian wanted to check on Horn and gave it some food. Zip also invited them for breakfast and said sorry for not having many types of food. Everyone then started talking about narwhal hunting and the things they would trade. Qin Tian suddenly got curious about narwhals, and one of the Inuits explained that their horns and oil were precious products. Qin Tian remembered from his wild animal collections that narwhals did exist, but only populated the Arctic area. Since narwhal meat was extremely rare, they hunted every summer, and Zip invited Qin Tian to go with them. They soon went outside, and Qin Tian and Nick discovered kayaks made from seal skin. The others wished Zip and the other men luck, and they all set out using sleds. Zip then explained that it took them 2 days to reach the seaside, and the fleet would stay until autumn. Soon the sky started to get dark, and Zip suggested camping for the day. The following day, everyone started their journey anew. Qin Tian was amazed to find snow-covered mountains. Soon they arrived at the seaside, where seagulls and puffins were plentiful. Zip pointed out the docks where the fleet usually docked, but Qin Tian's attention was drawn elsewhere. In the distance, penguins were huddled together. Zip had a surprised expression when he found out that Qin Tian did not know about penguins. However, Qin Tian was even more puzzled upon seeing polar bears and penguins coexisting in the same area. He knew they usually inhabit opposite polar regions. Curious, Qin Tian inquired about the fleet's schedule, to which Zip responded that there wasn't a fixed schedule as long as it was summer. Zip suggested sending Qin Tian and Nick back to the village. Wondering if Zip and the others were going narwhal hunting, Qin Tian expressed interest in joining. Zip proposed staying with them to help with the hunt, and Qin Tian enthusiastically agreed, eager to witness narwhals and meet the fleet. Suddenly, Nick appeared and informed them of a good location to set up igloos. The pair had previously discovered mosses that served as Horn's food source. Zip then called everyone for breakfast. He also fed his huskies with yakum, which were dried organs and bones, so the doggos would always have strength. Qin Tian found the mutual relationship between humans and dogs amazing. Qin Tian and Nick later went to the seaside to spot some narwhals. Animals that were at the top of the food chain rarely appeared, but according to Zip, they would show up during summer. However, Qin Tian's eyes were already hurting from looking at the water's surface reflecting the sunlight. Qin Tian then wondered if they should just keep waiting for the narwhals, but Zip advised them not to waste time and to look for other prey nearby. Nick excitedly offered to go hunting, but Zip was hesitant because he believed women were only for routine chores. Just then, Nick drew an arrow and fired it toward a seal, hitting the mark without missing. Zip and the others were impressed to see Nick hit the seal from such a distance. Zip then agreed to let Nick handle the hunting. While Qin Tian inspected a kayak, he noticed Zip holding something made of sealskin. Zip blew some air into it, inflating it like a ball. Qin Tian wondered about its purpose, and Zip suggested teaming up. Qin Tian agreed, and the men headed to the cold waters. However, Zip and Qin Tian's kayak fell behind. Zip realized it was Qin Tian's first time rowing a kayak. Zip suggested following the swimming process. Qin Tian picked up the pace, likening it to riding a bike. They finally spotted a seal. Zip told everyone to stop rowing and let the kayak float. As they got closer, Zip threw a harpoon, hitting the seal. It swam away, but the other end of the harpoon was connected to the seal's skin balloon. They chased the balloon until it slowed down. This indicated that the seal had already tired itself out. The seal emerged from the water as they pulled it onto their kayak. They placed it in the middle of the kayak, and Zip was happy to catch a big one. After that, they got off the kayak, and Qin Tian suggested taking the seal back to their camp. Zip said he would also go back and propose continuing the hunt the next day. He mentioned that being too greedy could lead to consequences. And Qin Tian remembered how some tribes believed in nature gods. Qin Tian had once pondered whether they should simply let things happen naturally, but Zip suggested gathering the courage to stand against it. Qin Tian was concerned that such defiance might anger the gods, but Zip corrected him, saying the gods permitted them to survive, hunt, and reproduce. According to Zip, the gods would only be displeased if they went too far and crossed a certain line. Qin Tian then remembered the importance of balance. Soon the others returned with seals they had hunted, confirming that they hadn't come across any narwhals. Back at their camp, Nick questioned the purpose of the seal skin balloon. Qin Tian explained that it served as a buoy marker during seal hunting. The day concluded with everyone sharing their stories over dinner. The day after, they noticed fewer seals, just like when Qin Tian and Nick hunted alone. Qin Tian wondered what they'd hunt now. They all climbed a cliff and gathered some puffin eggs from small ledges. Zip reminded him not to take them all, and Qin Tian recalled the importance of ecological balance. Since puffins stuck close to their eggs, they were easy to catch. Suddenly, Nick called them, claiming she had spotted some narwhals. A few narwhals swam by, and Qin Tian finally got to see them. Excited, Zip advised him to be patient. Impressed by Qin Tian's strength, Zip complimented him as he pulled him up from the cliff. Shortly after, Zip informed Qin Tian that hunting narwhals was more challenging than hunting seals, and they needed to work as a large group. Everyone then paddled out onto the water in their kayaks. The ice sheets were breaking due to the summer heat, and everyone positioned themselves to corner the narwhals. Zip instructed everyone to stop and wait for their prey, explaining that the narwhals wouldn't notice them if they remained quiet. Qin Tian decided to follow Zip's advice since it was his first time hunting narwhals. 2 hours passed, and all the narwhals did was engage in sword fighting. Qin Tian wondered if playing was all they did. Just then, Nick noticed that the narwhals were approaching. One jumped out of the water, and Qin Tian called it ugly. Poor narwhal. Nick was amazed to see the narwhal's long horns that grew along its own body size. The Inuits claimed they hadn't heard of anyone getting stabbed by the horns. Zip told them to be quiet as the narwhals moved, and they decided to follow them quietly to their new playing area. They had been on the kayak for almost half a day, and Qin Tian could feel the fatigue despite wearing thick clothes. He called for Zip, who understood and instructed them to continue the next day, since the narwhals wouldn't be far. As it started to get dark, Qin Tian skipped dinner to prioritize sleep, hoping for a good night's rest for the next day's hunt. The following day, as Qin Tian headed to the seaside, he pondered whether narwhals had schedules like humans. He tossed his kayak into the water and returned to the spot where he waited before. The arrangement of the narwhals was different from the day before. He observed that they kept a distance to avoid harming each other. Suddenly, they spotted a narwhal swimming alone. Everyone followed it, and Zip told everyone to spread out. He ordered them to shoot, and harpoons flew from 3 directions. The narwhal got hit and quickly dove underwater. A narwhal is stronger than a seal, but it couldn't escape with the balloons attached. Zip told them to chase it and stay alert to their surroundings. Other narwhals started moving, but Zip told them to ignore the rest. Everyone scattered, and Qin Tian wondered where the narwhal had gone. Nick suddenly noticed something. It was the balloons. Zip then told them to be patient and wait for the narwhal to lose its strength. Shortly after, they had caught their prey, and Qin Tian began touching the narwhal's skin. Zip then tossed a freshly cut piece of narwhal meat to Qin Tian, expressing how tasty it was. Qin Tian took a bite and savored the delicious raw meat. Zip reminded everyone to feed the innards to the dogs before going for another hunt, cautioning against getting too excited over just one successful catch. The group became enthusiastic, raising their hands in anticipation. That night, Zip shared that they were fortunate to encounter a group of narwhals. They hadn't seen any for 3 days prior to this, the last time they went searching. Zip advised everyone to head back and get some rest. Feeling exhausted, Nick and Qin Tian decided to call it a night to recharge. Outside, Horn and the Husky slept side by side. Suddenly, Horn woke up and noticed the night sky glowing. As the snow continued to fall, auroras began to illuminate the sky. Nick also spotted them and woke up Qin Tian, who was surprised to witness auroras in the area. The couple enjoyed the breathtaking sight together. Qin Tian couldn't believe he was witnessing something he had only seen in the media before. Zip and the rest emerged and pondered what might await them at the end of the heavenly path, their term for the auroras. The auroras faded away, prompting Zip to suggest that everyone sleep through the next day and head back home the day after. According to Inuit belief, the auroras were a path constructed by the gods to guide souls from purgatory. Given their frequent hunting, they thought the gods had taken notice of them. Qin Tian, for the time being, embraced their beliefs and decided to take a break, as he hadn't had much private time with Nick lately. 2 days earlier, the hunting group returned to the Inuit settlement. The people who greeted them were delighted to see the results of the hunt, which turned out to be a significant harvest for just half a month of hunting. Zip then put aside the narwhal horns and promised to share the earnings with Qin Tian when the fleet arrived. He introduced his wife, Usak, who was skilled at cutting the narwhal horns. Qin Tian handed over the task to her. He was reminded to arrive early for the celebration and distribution of the harvest. They explained that the food would be divided for banquets, reserves, family shares, and the hard-working hunters. Everyone decided to take a break, and Nick invited Qin Tian to rest with them. That night, everyone gathered in the huge igloo. Families enjoyed the meat the hunters had caught. Zip approached Qin Tian, expressing his intention to bring narwhal meat. However, Qin Tian preferred seal meat. Zip agreed, thanking Qin Tian for his assistance. Qin Tian then spoke with Zip's father, the eldest among them, asking if he had seen any strange buildings or temples in the area. Zip's father couldn't recall seeing any, and others shared the same sentiment. Qin Tian sighed, realizing he had to wait for the fleet to arrive in 2 weeks. He hoped to find the laboratory during that time to recharge the ring. Zip had asked about how the building looked so he could check with the other tribes. Qin Tian just said they were memorable. After Zip brought it up, Qin Tian learned that the Inuits were trading with nearby tribes. He hoped those tribes had seen what he was searching for. Out of the blue, a few Inuits began teasing a woman named Irina because she was leaving. Zip clarified to Qin Tian that Irina was getting married. Qin Tian wondered if the groom had come from another tribe, and Zip confirmed that they always married people from different tribes. Qin Tian then understood that they were avoiding the risks of inbreeding, and since their population was small, marrying individuals from other tribes was the solution. They explained to Qin Tian that Irina had agreed to join them by the seaside, and they had made this arrangement a year ago. Irina had met Tiran, a kind young man and a skilled hunter, 3 years earlier. Zip burst into laughter as he remembered Tiran, who wasn't great at expressing love. Tiran used to make excuses to trade items with them just to spend time with Irina. It dawned on Qin Tian that the seaside was also a place for blind dates, where people could meet and connect during the trading day with the fleet. Usak had given Irina a ring she discovered around the heavenly stele. Nick suddenly noticed the ring's appearance and informed Qin Tian about it. Qin Tian took a close look at the ring Irina held. Awkwardly approaching them, he wondered if he could inspect the ring and promised to be careful with it. The couple began analyzing it. The ring looked scratched and old, and Qin Tian hoped it would still work. Despite his efforts to elicit a response, nothing happened. Qin Tian then inquired about where they found the ring and assured them not to misunderstand, because he also had a similar ring. Due to the cold weather, Qin Tian allowed Nick to hold it for him, and Nick showed the ring to everyone. Irina and Usak were surprised when they saw the same ring and wondered where they had gotten it because it was more beautiful than Irina's. Zip's father then said they found the ring at the heavenly stele. Zip offered to guide them to the snow mountain to see it. Qin Tian was excited and thanked Zip, happy that Zip was willing to help since they were friends. Qin Tian thought the heavenly stele was like the lab. The next day, everyone went to the snow mountains. Qin Tian thanked Zip for starting early, but Zip was okay with it because he noticed how eager Qin Tian was about the topic. Zip told Qin Tian it would take them half a day to get to the mountain range, and Qin Tian was okay with that. Morning arrived and the decision was made to camp for the night. During that evening, Zip explained that they had named the place Heavenly Stele, but in reality, it was a deep basin. Qin Tian pondered why it had such a name, and Zip clarified that at the basin's bottom, there were stones with inscriptions they couldn't decipher. Qin Tian wondered if it was similar to a sinkhole, like the one they encountered on the first island. The following day, the group tied themselves together with ropes, with some members guarding the sleds and dogs. They began their journey across the snowy mountain. Qin Tian, curious about how they found the place with no resources for hunting or foraging, asked Zip. As Zip began explaining it was to avoid wolves, he accidentally slipped off a cliff. Fortunately, he was connected by a rope to the others, and with everyone's effort, they pulled him back, eliciting a sigh of relief from Zip. Despite the danger, Qin Tian suggested they go back, but Zip refused, emphasizing that those who gave up halfway would be abandoned by the gods, and urged Qin Tian to focus on the path. After 2 hours of challenging travel, they finally reached their destination, a vast basin at the peak of the snow mountain. Upon spotting the basin and the unusual weather-defying nature's rules, Qin Tian thought there must have been an accident in the nearby laboratory. Zip gestured towards the stone inscriptions in a certain direction. Everyone descended into the basin and touched down on its surface. Qin Tian was amazed to find numerous plants, speculating that an accident might have caused rocks to break and the soil to become fertile. The Inuits were once more impressed by the warmth inside the basin. They had been searching for a stone with inscriptions, and Nick quickly located one. Qin Tian approached it, confirming that the basin was indeed Area E7. As he examined it, he read the following information. The ecological balance in the area could be maintained without the need for energy. However, significant ecological changes could occur, rendering years of efforts futile and driving the inscription's author to contemplate suicide. Since his consciousness had been uploaded to the internet, he could only follow his programmed instructions. All he could do was observe the evolution of the land while awaiting hope. Qin Tian deduced that the inscriptions were a diary by a researcher from the lab. Zip had wondered if Qin Tian could read the inscriptions because he saw him deep in thought. Zip was curious about what the writings meant and if they were made by gods. Qin Tian then shared that the inscriptions were created by someone who designed the place. The Inuits thought of them as gods since they were creators. Even though Qin Tian didn't know the names of the creators, he wanted the researchers to be acknowledged. Qin Tian went on to explain to the Inuits that one of the writings mentioned how beautiful the place was. The Inuits, taking this as a sign from the gods, looked up at the sky and expressed gratitude for the gods creating such a beautiful place. They discovered an additional stone tablet, and the Inuits felt thrilled to learn the message. According to the inscription on the stone tablet, the study revealed that the laboratory had begun to crumble into dust. The lab's structure was expected to endure for hundreds of years. The researcher then chose to inform everyone about the happenings in Area E7 and utilized a laser to carve words onto stones. Another entry stated that erosion was triggering the imminent collapse of E7. The researcher wondered how people would react upon encountering the inscriptions on the stones. In the second month after the lab was lost, the natural balance of the area got messed up, kind of like what happened to Biosphere 3. The person who wrote in the diary was similar to Professors Yu and Wang, but different because he stuck around for hundreds of years until the lab ran out of energy. Sadly, no one ever showed up. After a while, the scientist woke up and saved his thoughts and the little energy left onto a ring, so it wouldn't disappear once he left the lab. When the lab ran out of energy, the environment in Area E7 got all messed up. But strangely, over time, plants and animals started thriving there. Qin Tian couldn't believe that the scientist waited all alone for hundreds of years. He found the last stone tablet with many words. The collapse of the lab had happened hundreds of years ago, and he had already used up the energy from the ring. It was sufficient for him to write his final diary. He began to complain about the cancellation of the solar module plan, crucial for emergencies, and the design of the ring. Feeling sadness, knowing he would soon disappear, he was still glad to have witnessed the evolution of an artificial island. He had expected Area E7 to collapse, but it didn't. Based on their analogies, he concluded that humans could indeed collaborate with nature when constructing land. The lab provided the material, and nature transformed it into habitable land. Just as he began explaining his conclusion, the diary abruptly ended. Qin Tian thought that the ring had run out of energy, and the researcher had passed away. It seemed impossible for him to visit the lab and meet its researchers. Nick wondered if Qin Tian needed more stone tablets to read, but he told her to gather everyone. Qin Tian then told the Inuits about how the snowy Area E7 came to be, but referred to the researchers as gods. The Inuits were surprised by this revelation, and Nick found the gods impressive. As usual, the Inuits found it hard to believe that gods were performing miracles on Earth. Qin Tian understood that the researchers wanted to return home, but Area E7 had become their home. However, they were anxious because no one would come and discover what they had worked for. Qin Tian reassured the deceased researchers that someone had seen all their hard work and thanked them for their efforts. In the end, he was able to meet them in another way. Feeling sorry that they had worked hard in a challenging environment, Qin Tian then told the others that they should return. They had left the snow-covered mountains, and Zip couldn't help but wonder how far they were from Qin Tian's house. However, our main character had a different destination in mind initially. Eventually, they reached a large pond that amazed Zip. Qin Tian urged him to take a closer look, revealing an abundance of fish, enough to sustain the Inuits through the winter. Upon reaching Qin Tian's and Nick's home, the Inuits were astonished to see a different kind of house. Their surprise grew as they found Horn's house to be better than their own. The real shock came when they saw a plentiful supply of food and drinks stored in the warehouse. Qin Tian claimed to have made them himself and generously offered them to the Inuits for dinner. That very night, everyone praised how much food Qin Tian had gathered. Qin Tian explained it was because they were in a forest with plenty of resources. The Inuits were happily sipping wine made from birch sap. Qin Tian then suggested that the Inuits should relocate to the forest, and Zip agreed due to the abundant resources. Although Zip felt guilty taking so much from Qin Tian, our main character assured him that it was a way of expressing gratitude and giving farewell gifts. Zip felt sad about Qin Tian leaving. In response, Qin Tian told Zip that he would feel hurt as a friend if Zip refused the gifts. Gratefully, Zip thanked Qin Tian and Nick for everything, but Qin Tian wanted to hear their gratitude once they were safely escorted back to the seaside. They all decided to take a day to rest and planned to leave the day after tomorrow. 2 days prior, everyone had returned to the Inuit settlement, gathering all belongings from Qin Tian's camp. A decision was made to accompany Qin Tian and Nick to the seaside for a few days. Filled with emotion, Zip hugged Qin Tian tightly, pledging to ensure their safe departure. The group set out for the bay, but the journey would extend by 2 more days as they had to bring Irina along. Qin Tian was okay with the delay, and the other Inuits playfully teased Irina, suggesting she was more eager than anyone to reach the seaside. Irina, blushing, insisted that she had no interest in seeing her future spouse at all. Laughter filled the air as the Inuits enjoyed the journey together. 2 days earlier, they reached the seaside where several igloos had been constructed. Nick observed how it resembled the Maya settlement. Zip mentioned that more people would join them later and suggested finding a spot to rest. While the rest searched for a place to build an igloo, Irina was on the lookout for her future spouse. Zip assured them not to fret as the fleet was scheduled to arrive later in the same month. Qin Tian could already see people engaging in trade, and Zip remarked that it was also the time for single individuals to seek partners. As night fell, Qin Tian stayed up late, causing concern for Nick. Eventually, Qin Tian agreed to go to sleep, acknowledging their different goals compared to the others at the seaside. The following morning, Zip showed Qin Tian around the trading market. Qin Tian observed the importance of food being exchanged for other valuable items. Zip introduced Qin Tian to a person named Adumu. Unexpectedly, Adumu encouraged a man to approach, indicating he should talk to his future wife. Tyron greeted Irina with shyness, and Qin Tian found him to be trustworthy. Zip and Adumu then decided to discuss wedding matters. Qin Tian and Nick chose to leave and wander around as outsiders. While walking, Nick noticed that there were no more than 20 types of products among the stalls. Qin Tian wondered if Nick enjoyed watching the negotiations. Suddenly, people near the sea began making a commotion. Qin Tian overheard them talking about a large ship. As the excitement grew, a massive ship came into view. A couple of ships approached the docks, and Nick wondered if they should move closer. However, Qin Tian advised her to take it slow. Suddenly, a small boat appeared, and a blonde man seemed relieved to have reached Iceland, expressing a desire for meat. Nick couldn't help but notice they resembled Jessica. Based on their appearance, Qin Tian guessed they were foreign sailors. Suddenly, a man exclaimed that another ship was docking. Qin Tian had heard from Zip but hadn't expected a second fleet. Zip then showed up, reminding Qin Tian to grab his belongings quickly. Qin Tian understood, and Zip told him to return with him. The day passed, and the line seemed endless. Worry filled the air as rumors circulated about sailors wanting to leave early to avoid oversaturation in the market. Qin Tian understood that rare things could be costly, and when supply exceeds demand, the value drops. He realized the first fleet aimed to make a big profit with this idea. When Zip's turn came, he exchanged narwhal horns for gold coins. The man in front took the horns to his superior, but Qin Tian explained to Nick that the man couldn't decide the price. Zip completed the trade, showing the gold coins to Qin Tian and Nick. Zip believed the gold coins would be useful if they had nothing to trade in the future with the fleet. He gave Qin Tian 20 gold coins as his share, expressing concern about Qin Tian leaving soon. However, our protagonist still needed to find a ship willing to accept them. Qin Tian promised to inform Zip when the time came. Shortly after, Qin Tian and Nick began to notice that the prices were dropping with 13 fleets around. Qin Tian saw this as an opportunity and started negotiating with others. He thought the prices for whale oil and wines were too high. He continued to haggle with others until someone told them to stop. Wealthy-looking men appeared, and Qin Tian could tell they were spoiled. He wondered how he could help them, and the men said they wanted to buy his reindeer. Qin Tian realized he was the only one with a reindeer around. Qin Tian refused to sell Horn, but the men tried to force it with 30 gold coins. Qin Tian said he wouldn't even sell Horn for 300 gold coins. The spoiled-looking man behind the eye-patched man said he would offer more than gold, like weapons, wine, and food. Qin Tian's patience reached its limit, and he glared at them, making the spoiled-looking man flustered. He felt embarrassed for getting scared by a barbarian. The man stepped forward, claiming to be a baron, and challenged Qin Tian to a duel. Qin Tian said he thought having a duel was unnecessary. The baron then wondered if Qin Tian was scared. Just then, a man told the baron to stop. A guy with brown hair and blue eyes showed up with a tall blonde man and a woman wearing glasses. The baron got mad for being interrupted, but the brown-haired man went to greet with respect. The baron felt pleased to be respected by these civilized people, and wondered what the man wanted. The brown-haired man then said it wasn't worth it for a noble like the spoiled man to duel over a reindeer. The baron agreed, but still wanted Qin Tian to feel honored that his reindeer was noticed. Qin Tian noticed that the guy with brown hair trying to help him. He was ready to use force if needed. A woman with glasses then tapped the brown-haired guy and shook her head. The brown-haired guy told the baron that there were plenty of reindeer in the area, and he could get one as a gift. He also pointed out that more local people were gathering around. The baron got worried, thinking they might attack him for offending one of their friends. The guy with brown hair and his friends used to think the baron's worries were kind of silly. They told him that people weren't interested in fighting, they just wanted to trade supplies. Another wealthy guy sighed, saying Qin Tian missed his chance for glory. They left, but the brown-haired guy still thought the rich folks were a bit silly for caring so much about glory. Then, the woman with glasses scolded the brown-haired man for suggesting to buy reindeer for the spoiled nobleman. Intrigued, Qin Tian asked if he could join them on their ship. He thanked them and introduced himself. The woman, named Oshbel, said words alone weren't enough. Qin Tian offered Horn and his stuff, but the brown-haired man, Kent, insisted the woman was just kidding. He introduced himself as Kent, Oshbel as Oshbel, and the tall man as Gossen. Kent reminded Qin Tian to steer clear of people like the Baron in the future. Qin Tian had wondered if Kent was a merchant because he was seeking gold coins, but Kent advised Qin Tian not to get his hopes too high. They eventually reached the trading area where Kent had set up. Nick observed that people were joyfully conversing, unlike at other merchants' stalls. Qin Tian agreed, noticing the amiable relationship between the Inuits and Kent. He decided to board Kent's ship. Qin Tian managed to get 34 gold coins for his stuff eventually, and Oshbel said that was the going rate. Qin Tian trusted them and thanked them with 6 gold coins. He also asked if they could take passengers and inquired about the fare to get back to their homeland. Kent was curious why Qin Tian wanted to leave, and he explained that he just wanted to explore the world. Kent had invited others to leave before, but Qin Tian told him to be honest about the place not being suitable for living. Kent agreed and said Qin Tian was the exception. Qin Tian then shared his thoughts with Kent about the importance of family roots. Qin Tian wanted to talk about the fare, and Kent hoped it could be free. Oshbel disagreed and said they could ride for free but had to pay 20 copper coins per day for food. Qin Tian wondered if his gold coins would be enough for the journey to their homeland. Oshbel claimed he could survive on 1 bread per day. Qin Tian decided to work for it, and Oshbel agreed to discuss the matter. Later, in Oshbel's tent, Qin Tian found a world map. Oshbel said some merchants sold them, but the Inuits weren't interested. Qin Tian bought a map for 1 silver. With a serious face, Qin Tian opened the map, revealing a kingdom called Holy Powet, and an empire named Garmin, with Iceland roughly sketched north of it. Nick had appeared with the change for the map. It simply meant that 1 gold coin was worth 10 silver coins. Qin Tian decided to leave, leaving Kent and Oshbel puzzled about his departure from Iceland. At that moment, Gossen claimed that Qin Tian didn't belong with the indigenous people in the first place. Qin Tian observed the detailed Holy Powet kingdom on the map, assuming that the merchants were from that kingdom. Iceland was supposed to be in Area E7, but it had minimal contact with the outside world. He couldn't estimate the true size of the country based on the map, and Treasure Island 2 and D3 were not marked. Nick wondered if they would leave in mid-September, and Qin Tian instructed her to prepare for the next week. Nick hoped they could find their ship again, and Qin Tian advised her to leisurely learn about the outside world from Kent during their travels. The next day, while Kent was talking with Qin Tian, he got called for work. Qin Tian noticed that Kent was the merchant leader, but Oshbel was the one doing most of the work. Regarding Gossen, Nick warned Qin Tian to be careful around him. Qin Tian and Nick left as the time had arrived. Qin Tian felt a bit sad about leaving Horn behind, but Area E7 was where Horn belonged. Zip assured Qin Tian that he would find a female reindeer for Horn, and Qin Tian expressed gratitude to the Inuits for everything. Zip gave Qin Tian a warm hug, wished him well, and Qin Tian waved goodbye. They loaded their belongings onto the small boats, including Kent's goods. As they were lifted by the pulley, Kent and Gossen chatted about how some people felt unsteady on the boats when lifted. But Qin Tian didn't mind it at all. Qin Tian and Nick stepped onto the deck and found it to be much larger and busier than their ship. Oshbel then showed them to their cabin. Along the way, Oshbel explained how the poop deck and cannons functioned and warned them not to touch them carelessly. They were taken to a cabin that resembled a basement. Qin Tian remembered designing cabins for their ship, ensuring proper ventilation, unlike Kent's ship. Next, they were led to what seemed like a storage area for miscellaneous items, and Ashbel suggested using fishing nets as makeshift beds. Qin Tian inquired about other accommodation options. Ashbel mentioned a single room available for 1 silver per day. Qin Tian agreed promptly, but Ashbel argued that the storage space was a better environment compared to Iceland. Qin Tian disagreed and expressed his preference for a single room. Ashbel then disclosed the total cost of using the room throughout the journey. Qin Tian, wanting to inspect the room first, requested to see it before finalizing the arrangement. Ashbel had led them to a room with a window, 1 bed, and a spacious area. Qin Tian and Nick quickly agreed to take the room. Ashbel excused herself to tidy up and pack everything into a bag. She went to the adjacent room and entered without much ceremony. She asked Kent and Gossin to vacate the room, instructing them to use the regular cabin for the rest of the journey. Qin Tian and Nick, feeling a bit guilty, soon discussed how the room they had chosen was better than the cabins on their previous ship. Qin Tian explained that since it was a merchant's ship, having a wide room was normal. He then suggested to Nick that they should do some cleaning to make it more comfortable. It was time to leave, and the anchors had been pulled out of the water. Qin Tian and Nick were happy they brought beddings because Ashbel had taken them away. After settling down, the two decided to take a walk. As they looked at the vast sea, memories flooded back of when they used to wander around like stray cats after leaving their beloved ship, Dawn. Suddenly, the captain and Ashbel appeared. Ashbel asked the captain to take care of Qin Tian and Nick, thinking it was their first time on a ship. However, the captain refused, considering them guests who were also there to work. Ashbel requested a day for them to enjoy the view of their homeland, Iceland, but the captain expected them to get seasick soon. Nick got worried, but Qin Tian was okay with it, understanding the challenges of managing a ship. Qin Tian was all too familiar with the hardships of living on a ship. Sailors had cleaned the floor and lifted goods from the indigenous people. Kent steered the ship until he spotted Qin Tian and Nick. He wondered if the couple felt uncomfortable on the ship, but Qin Tian found it bearable compared to hunting narwhals on a kayak. Kent then offered a bottle of rum, and Qin Tian accepted. Kent shared some precautions with Qin Tian. Soon after, dinner was announced and the hungry sailors began to move. Kent invited Qin Tian to the dining room, confusing him since he assumed the leader Kent had his own place. However, Kent claimed the food was the same for everyone in the end. Everyone lined up for the food, and eventually Qin Tian and Nick got their share. Though Nick was excited to eat, she discovered that the bread was hard. Kent suggested soaking the bread in the broth before eating. Later, Qin Tian and Nick roamed around and noticed that the sailors also didn't like the cabins, so they rested on the deck. Suddenly, the ship shook, and everyone quickly took their positions. Qin Tian saw how wild the ocean was and explained to Nick that not all oceans are that rough. As it got dark, the couple returned to their cabin. Qin Tian reminded Nick that it would get cold soon, and then they went to sleep. The next day, Ashbel introduced Roger to Qin Tian. Roger gave him 10 minutes to get ready for work. Ashbel hoped Qin Tian wouldn't mind Roger's way of speaking. Roger led them to a storage area, and Qin Tian wondered if the journey to Iceland was risky since they had many cannons. Roger instructed the couple to take barrels of tar onto the deck, which they lifted easily. Roger then told them to tar the entire deck for the whole day, or they wouldn't get dinner. Nick had been confused when she thought the tar might make people slip, but Qin Tian explained that it actually helped protect the wood from corrosion. Nick then wondered why they didn't do the same for the ship called Dawn, but Qin Tian clarified that the wood used for Dawn could withstand corrosion. Qin Tian sighed, realizing that coating the entire deck would take half a day, but considering the risky tasks other sailors had to do, Roger was already going easy on them. As evening approached, Roger told them they needed to speed up their work. The following day, it was Qin Tian's turn to be the lookout. Despite struggling, Roger, who was casually resting on the ropes, gave him some helpful tips. However, Qin Tian accidentally got his leg tangled in the ropes and expressed gratitude when Roger assisted him. The pair continued their work on the ship, maintaining hooks and ropes, and even taking care of cooking duties. Shortly after, the couple began feeling uneasy about using the ship's toilet. Qin Tian could even sense the turbulent sea while their stomachs were in turmoil. They couldn't help but sigh. Out of nowhere, Gossin appeared and invited them to have dinner together. Qin Tian then discovered that this dinner was much fancier than the previous ones. The couple was delighted to hear about cheese and wine. However, their excitement crumbled upon seeing the dinner. The water smelled bad, and the cheese had some unexpected visitors. Qin Tian now understood why the wine was brought out. Kent showed up and explained that the stocked freshwater had gone bad. He suggested swapping the maggot-infested cheese with cookies. Qin Tian was okay with the idea since both are sources of nutrients in the end. Kent then mentioned that the fresh water was melted ice from Iceland, and it had been a month since then. Qin Tian proposed sterilizing the water before storing it in barrels, but Kent didn't understand the term. Assuming that people from Holy Power didn't know about bacteria, Qin Tian explained it simply, describing them as tiny things invisible to the naked eye. Kent and Gaussen started worrying about their bodies after learning about bacteria. Kent realized that bacteria caused the spoilage but wondered how Qin Tian knew about them. Seeing Gaussen getting upset and realizing he didn't have a microscope, Qin Tian stopped explaining. Just then, a sailor collapsed on the floor. Kent excused himself, saying he needed to attend to something. Nick became concerned, but Qin Tian reassured her, telling her to trust Kent. Shortly after, Qin Tian and Nick found themselves immersed in water, questioning if there might be a leak. Roger assured them that Poseidon would only bother if the water reached knee-deep. He directed the couple to bail the water out of the cabin with a bucket. Qin Tian inquired if Roger knew anything about water pipes, but Roger admitted he had no clue, prompting a sigh from Qin Tian. Suddenly, Qin Tian spotted some bamboo lying around and considered using it. Despite Roger dismissing the idea, Qin Tian explained that he could channel the water flow with the bamboo. Roger burst into laughter, finding it as ridiculous as magic. Qin Tian, with a determined expression, asked Roger to give him 2 hours. Seeing Qin Tian's determination and unwillingness to back down, Roger began to wonder if Qin Tian could actually accomplish the task. Eventually, Roger agreed, and if Qin Tian couldn't complete it within 2 hours, he would be responsible for draining all the water from every cabin. Qin Tian, curious about the potential reward, found out that Roger had bet his week's worth of salary. Nick, uncertain about what to do, was told by Qin Tian that they needed to create bamboo tubes first. They borrowed some tools and proceeded to make holes in the bamboo, connecting them like pipes. Unfortunately, they could only use canvas tarpaulins to seal the holes. As they worked, other sailors started to take notice. They questioned whether this unconventional method could truly remove water from the hull bottom. Meanwhile, those in another cabin, who were busy draining water, were informed that they were witnessing the outcome of an Inuit losing a bet. Suddenly, a commotion arose as one sailor became angry when someone accidentally threw a bucket into the water, causing it to splash around. All of a sudden, the sailors saw a bamboo tube entering the cabin. On the ship's deck, Qin Tian was pouring water into the bamboo tube, and everyone got really upset with him. They couldn't figure out why water was continuously coming out of the bamboo. Someone hurried back and informed Roger that Qin Tian was once again filling the cabin with water. Out of nowhere, Nick rushed in and tapped the bamboo tube with the handle of a sword. At the same time, on the deck, Qin Tian noticed the signal Nick had just given. The couple then uncovered the canvas on both ends of the bamboo tube simultaneously. Water started spraying out of the bamboo tube on the deck. The sailors were stunned by this unexpected sight and quickly ran towards the others. Meanwhile, Kent and the others discussed the diseases affecting their crew. 2/3 were already sick. Gaussen claimed that sailors had been prepared for risks the moment they boarded the ship. Suddenly, a commotion arose about the bamboo pipe on the deck. They went to check it out, and Kent wondered what was happening. The sailors couldn't believe what they were seeing. Simultaneously, at the bottom of the hull, the bamboo pipe's end kept sucking water from the cabin. Everyone was shocked and impressed at how it worked, assuming that Inuits had magic. The sailors even called Roger to check it out. Everyone on the deck stood there, mesmerized by the incredible sight of water flowing from the bottom hull to the deck's side. As they witnessed the water spewing out of the bamboo, Ashbel questioned whether bamboo was the sole material used for this. She realized that using bamboo could save a significant amount of manpower on the ship. Ashbel contemplated asking Qin Tian for guidance on how to replicate it. Suddenly, Kent exclaimed about the siphon effect, and inquired more about it from Qin Tian. Wushbel was surprised that Qin Tian readily shared such information. Seizing the opportunity, Wushbel offered to pay if they could be taught the technique. This seemed like a breakthrough for Qin Tian. He feigned astonishment and asked how much they were willing to pay. Fortunately, he decided not to disclose any more information. Roger had gone to the deck and was wondering what was happening, seeing that many of them were grouped together. Ashbel then offered 300 gold coins for the information, surprising Qin Tian. Our protagonist tried to calm himself down since he still had the chance to raise the amount. Knowledge was truly the best wealth. Concerned, Ashbel asked for further negotiation. Qin Tian then boldly asked for 500 gold coins and feeless travel for the rest of the voyage. Seeing Ashbel silent, Qin Tian wondered if it was too much. However, Ashbel happily agreed and shook his hand. Qin Tian was disappointed that Ashbel quickly agreed since he could have asked for more. On the other hand, Ashbel was glad that it was only half of the price that she had initially expected. Everyone could see the cunning smiles from both Qin Tian and Ashbel. Roger spoke up, instructing Ashbel to include his weekly salary. Ashbel, acknowledging that Roger's bet led to a beneficial magical experience, chose not to deduct Roger's salary. Instead, Ashbel decided to cover the cost. Qin Tian, on the other hand, insisted that Roger need not repay him. Roger admitted to his loss, considering it a small amount equal to 1 week's salary. He pondered how long the magical effect would persist. Qin Tian clarified that it would continue until all the water was drawn from the cabin. However, a reset was required if any leakage occurred. To expedite the process, more bamboo was needed. Following Roger's instructions, the other sailors brought out the remaining bamboo. The siphon effect happened when the liquid moved to the top of the bent pipe because of pressure differences, and then it came down due to gravity. Inside the pipe, a vacuum was created, either by sucking or using a pump. As the liquid went from high pressure to low pressure, it passed through the pipe, reached the highest point, and then came down because of gravity. Qin Tian explained this, and the others looked confused, their heads metaphorically steaming. This was a common reaction that Qin Tian was familiar with. Kent wondered if the new terms were like bacteria. Ashbel got curious, and Kent provided a simple explanation. Gaussen at the back was overwhelmed with information. After an hour of teaching, Qin Tian realized how challenging it was. The concept was tough for them to grasp. Qin Tian decided to let them discuss among themselves to get some fresh air. He knew he still had to teach them in the coming days and took a break to check if the bamboo tubes were still working. Qin Tian went down to the bottom of the ship and found that water had been leaking from the tubes, but everything seemed fine. At that moment, someone yelled at them, curious about why they were down there. Suddenly, Roger emerged from the shadows. Qin Tian wondered why Roger had joined him in the bottom hull. He pondered if it had to do with the bet, but Roger suddenly revealed some wiggly things, saying he was deworming the ship. As they examined the creatures, Qin Tian recognized them as shipworms. Despite their name, shipworms were actually mollusks commonly found in oceans feeding on wood. Qin Tian began to consider if Roger had been catching these shipworms all along. Roger explained that shipworms and barnacles could harm the ship significantly, and he demonstrated how he detected them by stomping on the floor. Hollowed wooden boards, damaged by shipworms, released bubbles of air, allowing Roger to locate them. Roger nonchalantly pulled one from the stomped area, revealing his expertise. He then inquired if the people on the deck were done with the bamboo. Feeling a bit flustered, Qin Tian assured him that he would go check. Qin Tian went back to Ashbel's room and found the trio confused. Shortly after, they began tapping on bamboo tubes, and Kent was amazed at how the siphoning worked. Qin Tian stopped explaining and let them experience it firsthand. Thanks to this, Qin Tian and Nick took a break from working on the ship and enjoyed their time in their cabin. However, they felt uneasy idling too much and volunteered to work occasionally. Qin Tian noticed how Kent was compelled to work, and the payment meant for him was deducted from everyone's salary. Without realizing it, autumn arrived, and the weather started getting colder. Qin Tian now understood why sailors wouldn't part with their wine and often stayed inebriated. He tried pouring some alcohol into the foul freshwater, hoping it would kill the bacteria. But the stench persisted. The couple had no choice but to rely on the stored water, wine, and worms to survive. At that moment, someone fainted, and Qin Tian had already lost count. Nick insisted that the same person had collapsed twice before. The other sailors became angry with the fallen sailor because he was causing trouble. However, the sailor didn't respond, so they opened his clothes and noticed rashes on his skin. The other sailors believed it was scurvy. Qin Tian and Nick examined the patient, and Kent instructed Ashbel to fetch Roger. On the deck, the patient lay down, and everyone referred to the rashes as the mark of the demon. Qin Tian and Kent checked on the sailor, and upon closer inspection, Qin Tian recognized that it was indeed scurvy, judging by the visible symptoms. Gaussen assisted the man to the infirmary, and they hurried there. Inside, various tools and buckets of water were scattered around. The infirmary emitted a strong scent of blood, resembling a torture room in its appearance. Thanks for watching. If you'd like the next part, comment below.